have a quick run through of how we can integrate a Vue CLI application to a GraphQL server. So, okay. So now that we had a rough idea of what GraphQL is, and I had set up a quick server, which I'm just learning now that there have been difficulties getting it to run. So now I have just set up a Vue GraphQL client that is actually up and running. So for those that are too lazy to just go through the process with me, you could clone this link, yeah. Then set it up normally just like a Vue CLI project. But since we are here to learn, I think it's just easier if we do it together. So you can ask questions as we do, or you could chip in where you feel I'm doing something wrong, because I'm also learning as well. And probably if there's someone who is much more experienced or someone who understands a better way to do it, you can just raise a question or suggestion. It's welcome. Okay, so I'll just switch to my terminal so we can get started. The first thing I'll do is just set up a Vue CLI project.
Hi, sorry for the interruption. Hiyo link ya kuclone umetuma?
Oh, let me send it. Sent it. Okay, so I'll just use the default setup. Okay. Connection is a bit slow. I'm very far away from civilization today. Those who've cloned, you can just cd inside your folder and check out the part1 branch. So the part1 branch is a fully set up full stack Vue JS and GraphQL project that you can just run and go through. But for those who want to get their hands dirty, my setup is almost done. Then you can just go through it together. Okay, so mine is done. And we're going to use a nice library called Vue Apollo. So you can go to the Vue Apollo site and just take a look at it. They have a very detailed documentation that just tells you what it's all about, what they need to, how you need to tweak it, and what actually they're trying to solve. So they have a brief intro of what GraphQL is, what Apollo is. So from the introduction, you can see Apollo is a set of tools and community effort to help you the use of GraphQL in your apps. It's well known for the client and for the server. So Apollo is more of a tool to just abstract some of the GraphQL functionality that would have been much hard to do on your own. So it abstracts all those functionalities and just gives you an interface that you could just get to writing code that communicates to your server directly or GraphQL server. So installation is as easy as, if you're using Vue CLI, then you should just be able to add it. So that is what I'll do. So this is for first-time setup of Apollo. If you just want to get to know how this works with Vue, they have a very interesting example that you could just set up directly on your machine and run with it as they will set up for you a server and do the minimum configurations of how you could integrate the server that they've set up and your current application that you're working on. So here I'll just allow them to give the example because I want us to use that example just to get an overview of how your Vue client will work with the GraphQL server. Yeah, so Apollo Engine is an interesting tool. It's more of a cloud storage where you could save the GraphQL data and your application could query it real time as you use it. So I have an account. I'll just allow them to set it up.
You're setting it up from the cloud.
Yeah, I already have an account.
All right.
So if you click to it, should be able to redirect you to the Apollo Studio.
All right. All right.
So once you've created the account and you're in, you can just create a new graph and give it a name, whatever name you want. Let me just share my screen. So if I come to my home, so I have an organization where you can create as many graphs as I want. So I'll create a new graph and call it so it will give you an API key and some of the other environment variables that you could add. The cool part is the Apollo CLI tool will help you set up all this. So if I were just to copy this key, and paste it to my CLI, see, then I don't want to have a default tag. And yes, I want to publish it. Okay, so if I go back to my studio, if I go back to my studio, you can see now it's set up. You can see my mutations, the subscriptions, the objects, and all that. So this will just act like a storage for whatever data that I'm sending to my server. So after that, now we need to fire up both the GraphQL server and the Vue client. So I'll just do so these commands are all available on the package.json. It's also cool to go through the documentation and just understand what these commands mean, and other commands that are actually available. Other commands that are available within the Apollo ecosystem. So here you could serve your WSL app, you could build it, you could generate a schema for the Apollo service, then you could publish the schema, and you can start your GraphQL server. So if you look at this command line, we have two services that are actually running. We have the Vue CLI application running on port 81, and we have the GraphQL server running on port 4000. So if I were to open a browser, if I were to open a browser, I have my GraphQL server running up, and I also have the Vue client running up as well. If we inspect, you can see that it's connecting to the GraphQL server. So if I say my name, actually, you can see the actions. It's doing the query with my name as the parameter. Then the variables within the query is my name, which is done. And then on the response, you can see the entire response object. So the response is just attaching the hello to the name I'd given it. And you can see the query. The cool thing about Apollo is it actually handles the cache control for Graph. You remember last time we were talking, I mentioned something about caching being a con for GraphQL, but with Apollo, the plugin that they've developed is actually intuitive enough to handle cache control and all that. So let's just go through this up and try and understand what is going on with it as we explain. Before we continue, I need to know, has anyone managed to set it up?
You are going too fast.
I'm going too fast. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, like I've only managed to install the dependencies and also install Apollo.
Okay.
So from there,
If I'm going too fast, you can tell me. You see, if you keep quiet and I just keep going, I think you understand. If you tell me, I can actually slow down, or we can go through what it is you don't understand at the moment. Yeah. So where are you at the moment?
Manage like to run. Okay, I have already installed Apollo.
Okay.
Yeah, na sikuelewa venye how you managed to like run 3 servers.
Okay, I'm
For
running.
me, I'm only seeing localhost 4.
Oh, okay. I'm running the other one
Carry
here.
on.
I'm running the other server on this tab here. So one is running the Vue CLI server. If you go through the package.json, what Apple actually did, let me share my screen. Realize I've been sharing the wrong screen. What Apple actually does is it introduced a few configurations to our Vue CLI application. For one, it created a server. So the server has a schema. The schema just defines the types or modules, if you want to call them, the data that we'll be handling within this GraphQL application. Then it also defines the queries that we will use to get results from this data. Then also mutations that we can use when creating resources within this application. And then subscription that will always listen to messages that are sent through the socket if we are using a socket. Yeah. Then on the server also, it's created how the application will actually interact with the schema. So you can see it's using the file manager library to just scan through the schema file. Okay, so Phil, did you manage to finish setting up?
Yes, I did. Niko kwa the Vue Cli installation.
Okay.
Yeah, because my internet is a bit slow, but I'm following through.
Okay. So what the setup actually did was it created a GraphQL server from the Apollo example that I provided. Then it connected our the local schema that we had defined here to the cloud that we had created. It generated a .env file to just store some of the sensitive credentials that we don't want to share when we push this code to Git, and also provided the Apollo engine key, the API key that allows this application to send data to the cloud. And it added other dependencies that using Apollo will need to add. For example, the GraphQL type JSON for Apollo, and some of the other dev dependencies like the CLI plugin and the GraphQL tag. Yeah. Also, you can see that it defined some rules for the GraphQL files for the linting, and where we could validate the schema as well. Then it created a config file where it just defined some of the rules for the Apollo plugin. So it enabled mocks and enabled the Apollo engine where we are syncing the data. Yeah. Then now to fully understand how we are actually able to fully understand how we can actually do this and say, to be able to have this query made and the message returned, that's why I was going through the project structure just to see some of the things that us installing Apollo had introduced. So once the setup is complete, you can serve your Vue CLI applications using the normal Vue CLI command, which is yarn or npm serve, whatever you're using. Then Apollo has introduced a command here to start the server, which is Apollo start, which will fire up the server, and that is what we ran here. Yeah. Any question till there? Are there any questions? Oh, okay. So now we have a running server and we have a running Vue CLI app. So how does this Apollo plugin make us be able to send and receive data from the GraphQL server? So we'll go back to the Apollo site. So just to enable us understand what this add Apollo did, yeah, we can go through the manual installation process, which just shows that how many steps we skipped by just running Vue Apollo. So you could see that if you're doing this manually, then you had to add these three. You had to add these three dependencies, and then after adding them, now on your entry file, which is main.js, yeah, you could define the entry point. How you could define the URL where your GraphQL server is, and on this case, this has been done for us on the Vue-Apollo.js file. So to switch this. So you can see here, we install the plugin. We set up the token name if we have auth, that is. So anytime, if we decide to integrate auth on this app, anytime we want to check for the token will be saved on local storage under Apollo token. And then we can define our GraphQL endpoint. And then we can define the root where our GraphQL file is. Yeah. This is where all our GraphQL related logic for the client are defined. For example, if we were to add a message, and this is the mutation that we'd use to add a message. So on this mutation, we'll have to give an input which is of type the message input. So in the message input just accepts a text which is a string. Yeah. Then for the files, if you were to get all files, then we'll just query files. And these are the fields which are on the file type. So you get the ID, the path, the file name. Yeah. You could see much on the type here. So how you define the type helps you validate the type of data that you want to send or receive. So the type here is very important, because every time you're running this query for files, you will need to ensure that whatever data you're processing on fetch, or whatever data you're sending on post is well typed and properly formatted as defined by your type. This is what we meant last time by saying in GraphQL, the client could dictate the design of the API, sort of. Yeah. And the same for messaging and for uploading a file. Uploading a file is a mutation. So if you've noticed as I go, you've realized that when we are fetching, we use a query, and we are creating or posting a resource, we use a mutation. Yeah? For example, if we were to go to our playground, sharing the wrong screen. Okay. I don't know what's wrong with my server. I'm not restarted. something wrong with my ports. Take a look at that. Wrong with the form 7 application. Look at it later. So just go back to what we were doing. So once we have the Apollo settings set up on this file, we've defined the endpoint, the file's root, the default options, using a WebSocket, the token is present, automatic query persisting to Apollo engine. So this means every query that is made, it's persisted on Apollo Cloud, so that when you're fetching next, if the query is current, it's just availed automatically. Then if you want to do this with SSR, you could enable. Now here, this is where we create the provider. Using the Vue Apollo plugin, you could set up the client as you defined earlier. You could tweak it further. For example, here, if you have a fetch policy for APIs, you could integrate. If you have further security measures that you check on your API, you could append them here. And then finally, error handling. Yeah. So if you prefer to handle this differently, maybe use something like Sentry, you could make your Sentry calls here. Something like that. So this is on login. So when a user logs in, this is out of the box. So this is a function you could call immediately a user logs in, so that the token is persisted with the Apollo client to local storage, so that every time before, if in case you have protected routes, for example, user profile, before you make that GraphQL call or that query or mutation, you'd want to check if a user is logged in and the token is present. So this function here will just abstract that for you, in that before call, you can always immediately after login, you can always persist the token to storage, and then on logout you could remove the token, or if you prefer a more secure logout, you could make the call to the API and revoke the token as well, but also remove it from local storage. So with that, you actually just set up the entire Apollo library, and now you could actually start making calls to your GraphQL server and consume it. So if we come to the app.vue, we have this apollo.vue component, apollo example.vue.component, where we are doing all those actions that are on the front page. So the cool thing about Apollo is you won't have to, unless you're using another pattern, maybe using Vuex, and you want to make all your calls on the store actions reducers, you could actually just use the Apollo query component that comes with the library. Then on a case where, for example, here we are doing a query for hello world, we want to pick the username and return hello on completion of the fetch. So what this will do, the Apollo query component will require the query you are defined on your GraphQL query file. So in this query, we are looking for the variable, which is the name, and then making the call to the hello query. Then the hello query will return hello and the name that is provided. So this component will do the fetching and handle the result. So once it fetches and there's a result, it will return the result. In case it's loading, it will show loading. Of course, the normal Vue directives will do that. Then if there's no result, it will present there's no result. If there is result, it will return the response that is fetched from the response, from the API. The same for messages query. The query component will just go to the messages query, fetch the messages, and then return it. Yeah. So I just want to try that. Don't know why this is not working. Try this. Let me solve this again. So I think now my server is back on. So if you run the query for messages, the empty messages, let me try and set up a message. Open the messages. I think there's so much things I need to change on mine. Time is also running out. So I feel like this has been really underwhelming and I should have prepared better, but I hope you gained a bit of where this was headed. So I'll do this at my own time and share it together with the blogs that I was to finish. And hopefully next week we can cover what we didn't get to cover today. I also have to rush, so I think we'll end from there. And thank you guys for joining.
All right. Thanks, Dom. That's nice. If you will share the blog before the next session,
Yeah,
kindly.
I'll try and finish them today. It's been a busy week, so I'll just try and finish them today and share.
All
And
right.
also, I'll tweak some of the things that are wrong with this repo, and I'll push it to the ones that are already live. Okay.
Okay. The blog
Thank
will
you.
contain the parts of what we'll cover in the next session.
Yeah, yeah, it will be complete so that we can just prepare for the next session as well.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Hope you had a great session. So I'll just end the call there. Hey,
Okay.